What you call love is nothing more than your ego wearing a mask of devotion. That desperate clinging you mistake for affection? That possessive fire burning in your chest when they don't text back? That isn't love. It's your terror of abandonment, dressed up in romantic poetry. You've been calling your neediness noble. You've been calling your fear sacred. Every time you say, "I can't live without you," you're not declaring love. You're confessing your own emptiness. You're announcing to the world that you are so fundamentally incomplete that another person must fill the void where your soul should be. The truth cuts deeper than you want to admit. Most of what you've called love has been nothing but sophisticated begging. A transaction wrapped in sentiment. An emotional hostage situation where you hold yourself captive and call it devotion. Look at how you love. With trembling hands reaching for validation. With eyes that scan for signs of approval. With a heart that contracts in panic at the first hint of distance. This isn't the love poets write about. This is the ego's desperate attempt to survive through another, to exist through external confirmation, to feel worthy through borrowed worth. You mistake intensity for depth, drama for passion, suffering for proof of sincerity. You've confused the earthquake of insecurity with the steadiness of genuine affection. You've mistaken the fever of attachment for the warmth of true connection. From childhood, they taught you that love means sacrifice. That love means making yourself small, so another can feel large. They fed you fairy tales where princes rescue, princesses where completion comes from union, where two halves make a whole. They never told you that two halves make two broken people leaning on each other's wounds. Your parents showed you love through worry, through control disguised as care. Your mother's anxiety became your blueprint for devotion. Her sleepless nights, spent wondering where you were, became your template for what caring looks like. Your father's emotional distance became your model for longing. His silence teaching you that love must be earned through performance, through being good enough, through constant proving. They called it protection. This teaching you that love means losing yourself in another's needs. They called it selflessness when it was really self-erasure. They praised you for putting others first, never questioning whether you had a self to put second. Religion whispered in your ear that selflessness is holy, that emptying yourself for another is virtuous. The church taught you to turn the other cheek, to give until it hurts, to find meaning in martyrdom. But what they called selfless love was often just self-hatred wearing a halo. What they called sacrifice was often just fear of standing alone in your own light. School reinforced the lesson through every group project where you did the work for others, every friendship where you gave more than you received, every relationship where you became the therapist, the fixer, the one who cared more. They rewarded your people-pleasing and called it leadership. They praised your self-denial and called it maturity. Society handed you movies where love conquers all through grand gestures of abandonment, where the heroine gives up her dreams for the hero, where the hero proves his love through possessive jealousy, where happiness comes through finding the one who will complete you. They sold you the lie that love means merger, that boundaries are barriers, that independence is selfishness. And so you learn to love from deficit, to give from emptiness, to offer what you don't possess and call it generosity. You learned to mistake dependency for depth, possession for passion, need for nobility. You learned that love hurts, that jealousy proves caring, that worry demonstrates devotion. Every broken heart became proof of how deeply you could love, when it was really proof of how little you knew about loving yourself. Every sleepless night spent analyzing their words became evidence of your devotion, when it was really evidence of your desperation. Every compromise of your values became a sacrifice for love, when it was really a betrayal of your own soul. The ancient Greeks understood what we have forgotten. There are different kinds of love, and most of what we call love is eros corrupted by ego, desire twisted into demand, longing poisoned by possession, attraction infected by attachment. True love, what they called agape, flows from abundance, not absence. It gives because it overflows, not because it calculates returns. It sees the beloved clearly, not as a projection of its own needs. It honors freedom, not because it doesn't care, but because it cares enough to let the other exist fully in their own truth. But the ego cannot love. It can only want. It cannot give. It can only bargain. It cannot see another clearly because it sees everything through the lens of its own terror and hunger. The ego in love is like a drowning person grabbing at anything that floats, calling the drowning devotion, and the grabbing affection. When the ego loves, it loves conditionally, though it swears its love is unconditional. It loves the other for how they make it feel, for what they provide, for how they fill its emptiness. Remove the feeling, the provision, the filling, and watch how quickly that unconditional love reveals its conditions. Watch how the ego's love turns to anger when not reciprocated, to manipulation when threatened, to guilt when questioned. The ego's love is always a form of consumption. It devours the other's attention, their energy, their freedom, their very essence, and calls this consumption intimacy. It feeds on their presence and starves in their absence. It demands their thoughts, their time, their future, and calls these demands commitment. This is why ego love always carries the seed of its own destruction. Built on need, it creates more need. Built on fear, it creates more fear. Built on emptiness, it devours whatever it touches, leaving both lovers more depleted than before. It's a fire that burns everything it touches and calls the burning warmth. The ego promises completion through union, but delivers only the multiplication of incompleteness. It promises security through possession, but delivers only the amplification of insecurity. It promises fulfillment through another, but can only deliver the deepening of unfulfillment. This is the love that creates addicts, not lovers. This is the love that builds prisons, not partnerships. This is the love that demands proof, keeps score, and dies the moment it's not fed. But there is another way to love. A love that emerges not from what you lack, but from what you abundantly are. This love doesn't need the other to complete it because it recognizes its own wholeness. It doesn't fear loss because it knows that what can be lost was never truly possessed. It doesn't demand proof because it doesn't doubt its own worth. This love is like the sun. It shines not because it needs to be seen, but because shining is its nature. It warms not to receive warmth in return, but because warmth radiates naturally from its core. It gives light freely to all who enter its presence, asking nothing, expecting nothing, attached to nothing. The sun doesn't withhold its light from those who turn away, doesn't dim when clouds pass, doesn't burn brighter to prove its power. When you love from abundance, you love the other's freedom as much as their presence. You celebrate their growth even when it leads them away from you. You support their dreams even when those dreams don't include you. You honor their choices even when those choices cause you pain. This isn't martyrdom. This is love so full it can afford to let go. This abundant love sees clearly because it isn't clouded by need. It sees the other as they actually are, not as the ego wishes them to be. It doesn't try to fix, change, or complete the other, because it recognizes that everyone is already whole, already complete, already perfect in their beautiful imperfection. From this place of fullness, generosity becomes natural. Kindness flows without effort. Compassion arises not as duty but as recognition, seeing in the other the same divine spark that burns within yourself. This love doesn't diminish you when you give it away. It multiplies like a flame that lights other candles without losing its own brightness. You become like a river that gives water freely to everything it touches, the flowers, the animals, the earth itself. Not because it must, but because giving is what rivers do. The river doesn't become less by giving. It becomes more itself. It doesn't keep accounts of what it has given or demand gratitude from the flowers it nourishes. This love trusts without naivety, hopes without expectation, commits without clinging. It enters relationships not to be completed, but to share its completeness. It doesn't love to be loved back, but loves because loving is its nature, its joy, its deepest expression of self. From this space, you can love freely because you have nothing to lose and everything to give. You can love deeply because your depth doesn't depend on another's response. You can love wildly because your freedom isn't threatened by another's choices. Yet even this love, pure as it may be, must sometimes withdraw into silence. Even the sun sets. Even rivers return to the sea. Even the most generous heart must sometimes turn inward, not in selfishness, but in sacred wisdom. There are seasons when love means stepping back, when devotion requires distance, when the highest gift you can offer is your absence. Not because love has failed, but because love understands that growth sometimes requires solitude, that healing sometimes demands space, that the soul sometimes needs silence to remember itself. This withdrawal isn't abandonment. It's sacred pause. It's the recognition that even love can become attachment if held too tightly. Even generosity can become control if given without discernment. Even the purest intention can become ego if it never questions itself. In this silence, you discover that love isn't something you do, it's something you are. It isn't a transaction between two people. It's a state of being that exists independent of relationship. It isn't dependent on another's response. It's complete in itself, like the moon that shines whether or not anyone looks up to see it. The ego fears this silence because it cannot survive without the drama of relationship, without the constant feedback of need and fulfillment, without the mirror of another's attention to confirm its existence. But the soul finds peace in this quietude, finds strength in this solitude, finds love in this letting go. Like the winter tree that appears dead but is gathering energy for spring's explosive growth. This withdrawal is not death but preparation. It's the soul's way of composting old patterns, of shedding what no longer serves, of returning to the source from which authentic love springs. In this silence, you learn to love your own company. You discover that solitude isn't loneliness, it's fullness without distraction. You realize that you don't need another to feel complete because you were never incomplete to begin with. The incompleteness was just a story the ego told to justify its endless seeking. From this silence you emerge not emptied but filled, not broken but whole, not desperate but free. And when you love again, if you choose to love again, it comes from this place of completion, this place of power, this place of peace. The love that emerges from silence doesn't grasp because it doesn't fear loss. It doesn't control because it doesn't fear chaos. It doesn't demand because it doesn't doubt its own worth. It simply is, like the mountain that stands majestically, whether surrounded by storms or blessed by sunshine. The question now becomes, will you continue loving from emptiness, or will you dare to love from fullness? Will you keep calling your neediness noble, or will you develop the courage to love without attachment, to give without expectation, to care without clinging? This transformation isn't easy. It requires dying to the ego's version of love and being, reborn into something more authentic, more mature, more free. It requires facing the terrifying possibility that you might be complete already, that you might not need another to make you whole, that you might be capable of loving without losing yourself. It means unlearning everything you were taught about love and learning to trust the wisdom that emerges from your own depths. It means risking the ego's death to discover the soul's immortality. It means choosing growth over comfort, truth over familiarity, freedom over security. If this resonates with your soul, if you feel the call to love more authentically, write in the comments, "I choose love that flows from fullness, not emptiness." Let this be your declaration, your commitment, your first step toward a love that actually deserves the name. The path forward requires both courage and wisdom. Courage to love fully, wisdom to love freely. Courage to open your heart, wisdom to release your grip. Courage to feel deeply, wisdom to act from center rather than from wound. Courage to be vulnerable, wisdom to maintain boundaries. Courage to trust, wisdom to discern. Watch how different your relationships become when you approach them not as someone who needs completion, but as someone who offers abundance. Watch how different love feels when it arises not from fear of being alone, but from joy in being connected. Watch how different you become when you love not to be loved in return, but because love is your nature. Notice how the quality of people you attract changes when you stop attracting from neediness and start attracting from wholeness. Observe how conflicts dissolve when you stop fighting from wound and start responding from wisdom. See how intimacy deepens when it's based on choice rather than need. on sharing rather than taking, on celebration rather than completion. This is the love that heals rather than wounds, that frees rather than binds, that elevates rather than diminishes. This is the love that remains steady whether the other stays or goes, because it lives not in the space between two people, but in the depths of a single soul that has remembered its own completeness. The ego will resist this teaching. It will insist that love without need isn't love at all. It will argue that attachment proves devotion, that jealousy demonstrates passion, that suffering validates significance. It will whisper that this kind of love is cold, distant, uncaring. Let it argue. You know better now. The ego will offer you 1,000 reasons to return to the familiar pain of needy love. It will promise security through control, certainty through possession, meaning through suffering. It will tell you that without drama, love isn't real. Without pain, passion isn't authentic. Without fear, commitment isn't serious. But you've tasted something different now. You've glimpsed love that doesn't hurt, passion that doesn't possess, commitment that doesn't cage. You've seen the possibility of loving like the elements love, unconditionally, abundantly, freely. Love like the sun loves, unconditionally, abundantly, freely. Love like the river loves, generously, naturally, without attachment to outcome. Love like the mountain loves, steadily, powerfully, immovably centered in your own truth. Love like the ocean loves, vast enough to contain all storms, deep enough to remain peaceful beneath the surface chaos. This is the love that changes the world, one authentic relationship at a time. This is the love that breaks generational patterns, that heals ancestral wounds, that creates new possibilities for human connection. This is the love that your children will learn from, that your community will benefit from, that your own soul will finally recognize as home. The journey from ego love to authentic love is the hero's journey of the heart. It requires leaving the familiar territory of need-based relating and venturing into the unknown landscape of self-sourced loving. It demands facing the dragons of your own insecurity and discovering the treasure of your inherent worth. But this is the only journey worth taking. This is the only love worth giving. This is the only relationship worth having. First with yourself, then with others. Everything else is just practice, just preparation, just the ego's elaborate games disguised as romance. Choose differently. Love differently. Be different. The world is waiting for the love you came here to give, not the love born of emptiness, but the love born of remembering who you truly are.